Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Abez Show, where today I have someone who I've worked with years ago, and we've built such great products together. I'm so happy to have my friend and one of the best tech guys I've ever worked with, Mamoun. Hi, Mamoun.
Hey, Abe, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. And how is everything with you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm always happy to talk to you as well. So please tell me more about yourself and tell me more about your journey.
Sure. My background is in computer engineering. That's my academic background. And after I finished my degree, I joined a company in Jordan that works in HR and recruitment software. That's where we met, of course. I joined as a junior engineer, fresh out of university, and kind of worked my way up through the ladder to a senior engineer. And then at the last 2 years there, I was head of engineering, so kind of a transition from an individual contributor to more engineering management role. After that, I moved to Amsterdam to be CTO of early stage startup here in Amsterdam, which was basically the kind of Airbnb for concerts and artists. So you want to book a DJ for your birthday or like a band for your wedding, you do it through the platform. Unfortunately, that startup didn't survive the Corona stuff, and so the timing was tricky because like we were trying to raise investments and the whole pandemic hit, so like the industry kind of died in a week. So after that, I joined a company that does anti-money laundering, so kind of applying AI and machine learning models to detect fraudulent activities in online payments. And currently, I'm preparing to move to Canada to join Shopify as an engineer as well.
Wow. That's very interesting. I worked in actually now four different verticals,
Mhm.
right? HR tech is, in my opinion, still there's a lot of disruption that needs to be done there because it's
Definitely.
still not where it was. But it's amazing how a lot of HR tech companies now pivoted into the fintech and insurance
Mhm.
tech model, with
Yeah.
likes of the big companies like Zenefits and even
Mhm.
locally here with Bezat and ZenHR
Yeah.
and all these companies. But and I like how you actually pivoted deeply into everything that you walked into, from HR tech, which was had a bit of fintech, but said, you know what, let's explore more into fintech. You're going into that anti-money
Yeah.
laundering, and now that's super cool. So tell me, like, how did you find your calling into the tech world? Like, I know
Mhm.
you did the whole schooling bit, but tell me more on how you felt, you wanted to do more about that.
Sure. Actually, the schooling bit was interesting because computer engineering, as many of you know, basically are kind of focused on hardware and like hardware system design. But since I was young, actually, I found my true calling was with software. I don't know if you remember these MSX computers, the Sakhr computer that we had in the
Yes, yeah.
late 80s, 90s. Yeah, so I had one at home, and it came with like the basic programming language book. Like the book came with the computer, and I was just a kid, kind of copying things from the book and trying it, and you see stuff popping on the screen, and it, I was tantalized by that, right? Like this ability to actually, will something into existence, like just create something. I think it's an important feeling, and you see it in a lot of disciplines, right? You see it in art, for example, like with painting, with writing a book, with all of that, and I feel kind of programming and software in general also gives you this superpower, and I was hooked ever since. Uh, After I finished my studies, I didn't even bother to look for a kind of hardware or networking kind, which was like more aligned with my studies. I was like, yeah, I just want to do software and do programming, and it's
But
working out so far.
that's something I didn't know about you. It's something that I thought you were a software engineer, but I guess you were more hardware. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it was a lot of hardware and circuits and electronic stuff. Yeah.
that's super cool because at that one time when I graduated from university and I was kind of lost as well, and everybody's like, oh, computers are so hot. Okay, and I'm an old man, so I graduated in the mid '90s. Uh, so there was this amazing certificates floating
Hmm.
out there, which was, oh, do the Microsoft certificate or do the Cisco certificate. So
Yeah.
I wanted a guy, and I did get certified. In all fairness, and it did open up my career into technical support and
Hmm.
into the whole call center world. But but I never thought, uh, for me personally, to go into software. Maybe
Hmm.
maybe because I never thought of that logical thinking that software engineers have. So okay, let's talk about. I'm sure you had many side projects that you've built. A couple of little apps here and there. Some of the learning, some of the stuff that you'd never do again. So tell me more about that.
Sure. Being in the industry, I always see this kind of expectation for side projects, and especially like when somebody's like in recruitment and kind of people are screening CVs and stuff, they kind of like look at side projects and stuff. And that side, I did play with some stuff. I think most notable mention is I started a project with my wife actually. So she's a founder. I'm the kind of technical co-founder. It's a platform for Arab singles kind of to meet, like people looking for a serious relationship, for marriage. So that's just just started. We're still like in a pre-alpha stage. We've got some small presence. We got a bunch of users, and we're testing stuff out, and it's going really nice so far. The cool thing about side projects, the power it gives you, that sometimes if you work in a company, you don't really there's a lot of things pulling at you, right? A lot of the kind of politics, stuff like business you want to do. But if it's your side project, you kind of the sole decider on what you want to do, right? So one of the cool things like we did was we did the lean startup paradigm by the letter, right? And this was always something I really wanted to do, right? Like actually, be really academic about this whole, prioritized learning and discovery and all of that. And, working on side project gives you that power, and it's a very rewarding feeling. And things are going very interesting so far. We have 6 couples that got engaged and married so far, so pretty happy about that. Yeah, so everybody, if you want to check it out, it's sanagel.social. So check it out and let me know what you think.
Definitely, and I like how one of the metrics is people getting engaged. I think
Yeah.
maybe it's something that which would lead me to your next question. So, what would that project's BHAG be? You want to get the whole Middle East married, or like
Yeah,
what?
definitely. Like we have a really happy marriage, and we want everybody to kind of feel the same way and having this kind of relationship in their life. So yeah, definitely, like having like a million Arab couples meet through Sanagel is kind of what we want to do.
Well, it sounds like a very admirable BHAG, but
Yeah.
also I have a feeling that some people will one day fire back and say that app is what put me in what in this situation, and it's something like that. But no, I think that's and that's something actually I know you and I have talked about a lot about
Mhm.
what to measure. I know me and you
Yeah.
worked on a couple of projects uh, when we were at Akhtabut and we were at Zen HR, and we talked about what are some of the key measures and what do we need to track. And and I see this a lot with a lot of startups and a lot of companies I've worked with. They
Mhm.
have a dashboard and they're tracking something like 50 metrics, but
Yeah.
I always ask this question: is what what is the needle mover, or what metric
Mhm.
will move the needle? And that's something that I wanted to ask you more about. So
Mhm.
what is the metrics for this app? Like, obviously, you said it when you smiled and said, oh, 6 couples are already,
Yeah.
engaged. What is the realistical measurements for this? Is it the percentage of, engagement? Is it the number of males to female ratio? Like
Mhm.
what do you think, in your opinion, is the needle mover?
Sure. So to actually talk about your first point, right? I see a lot of pitfalls, especially like kind of first-time founders go into is with metrics, is they do track a lot of vanity metrics, right? So you can track stuff like, hey, the number of users or the number of clicks, but these metrics only go to the right and up, right? So there is no actual real insight that's basically coming to you from tracking these metrics. And the other issue as well is like you track, as you said, like a dashboard with the 50 different things, and things get lost in translation, right? It's too much data, too much information to digest and kind of actually make informed business
Yeah.
decisions from the data, right? So yes, I definitely agree with you on having this kind of North Star metric for your product, and basically making sure that you're because moving the needle on that metric is what matters. For us at Sanagel, it's two-way conversations, right? We feel the magic or like the maximum value from the product comes when actually you match with someone and we actually start a two-way conversation and talk to each other. I think that's the moment where you get a lot of value from the app. So that's basically what we really kind of, what we really kind of pay attention to and make sure that people are talking to each other and like we do everything we can to facilitate that conversation, right?
Oh, it's a good point, and and in all fairness, I do sit with a lot of founders that say, we're going to do this, do that, but they have no traffic. You know what I mean? Like there is no, if you don't get people on your site,
Yeah.
never ever, experiment to, have even you can't even run your experiments. Your A/B testing.
True. Actually, it's very interesting you mentioned that, right? Especially with stuff like marketplaces. So it's talking about like kind of supply and demand sides. You always have this chicken and egg problem, right? And you need people to be there to actually start value. And these type of businesses really enjoy what they call network effects, like having more people on the platform actually increases the value immensely for everyone on the platform. So part of like our lean startup approach we did was like we didn't actually start with for like the first 3 or 4 months there wasn't any line of code, right? We started literally with a Facebook group and basically doing the matching manually and all of that, and start to build this audience and actually like as cheap as possible in terms of time and energy to kind of probe if there's any actual interest on a platform this kind. So it was really actually cheap and fast to test hypothesis and kind of try out stuff. And you get these early adopters who are basically, if there's actual need for your app, they will tolerate a lot of stuff. They will tolerate that, the tech isn't there. They will tolerate the process a bit clunky because, they're seeing immense value from the product, right? So, and once we actually launched the kind of app, basically what you had was, we already had like an audience of like 5,000 people say, hey, you worked with us before, you know who we are. This is now something that you can do yourself. And this actually kind of solved this initial chicken egg issue for us. So we got somebody to start using the app from day one.
Wow, that's amazing. Like how lean you were, and you were really literally took the word MVP to
yeah.
You streamlined it, because right now a lot of times, especially we're seeing a lot of tech entrepreneurs and a lot of entrepreneurs getting into this tech space, where people are getting away from this MVP, which is the minimum viable product, a minimum lovable product, which means has a couple of features. They can do that. Some founders, do not believe in having a service that just does one thing. It has this like, okay, no, we need to add a feature. Back in the day when we were talking about the different methods of development, the waterfall, where old Windows, where there was one patch that every 1 year or every 6 months was out there, and it just took like hours to download, and but and then the world went into agile, where it's like quick rapid development, and you know what I mean. But I think because of not a lot of most of the new founders that I'm talking to are not as technical, so they're developing not a hybrid model, like they're still very agile, but they need to add more features. They believe if they add more features, they can sell the product a bit more. Honestly, it's a very logical way of thinking. I'm not disagreeing, because sometimes people say it's an MVP, but you're like, yeah, this MVP sucks.
Like if you're in stealth mode for 2 years, then probably you're building something when you're released nobody wanted. So actually, what you said is very interesting, and it's kind of, we have a bunch of things to talk about. So first thing, I actually think technical founders have these issues, like technically inclined founders have this issue more than non-technical, like, hey, I want to start, I want to do microservices, I want to do this like really Kubernetes stack that scales to millions of users. Like, no, just use something, really quick, just get something out there. And I'm definitely in that camp. Of course, it really depends on the industry as well, Abe. I mean, some industries, like let's say if you're doing kind of hardware product, that's different life cycle than consumer software product. If you're in a highly regulated industry like fintech and or something similar, right? That's also a lot of kind of regulatory hoops that you have to go through before you get your app out there. But definitely, my advice would be always. So if you're in a startup, you're in learning mode. Like you're basically in this map. Like, I don't know if you played the strategy games before, you have this fog of war kind of thing, right? Where you just have this map, it's all blacked out and you have to explore and like kind of see stuff. And that's how it is for a startup, right? You have to actually, always prioritize learning. At every point, your question would be like, I have this hypothesis. How can I cheaply as possible test that this would actually work and people want it? And the thing of like feature completeness, like, hey, there's a checklist of features that no way I'm gonna sell this product until I have it. I mean, yeah, if you actually go and talk to users and you figure that out, that's great, then you do that. But what I feel like people actually have this kind of imaginary line, line in the sand of like, nobody would buy like this product if it doesn't have X, Y, and Z features. But that's not true. Like, actually talk to your customers, talk to your prospects, even if it's like show demos, show wireframes, right? And always kind of optimize toward learning instead of completeness. Definitely until you kind of find your product market fit and you start like, hey, everybody's like want this product, you can make it as fast as people want it. Then that's kind of the time to actually, think about scaling, think about, these kind of more completeness areas regarding product.
And you know what? You said something very crucial that I also see a lot these days is a lot of the founders and a lot of people in companies do not talk to their customers. They assume, and I see that a lot in SMEs as well, not only in tech companies. While they assume that people will buy this because they've had that personal need. And, I try to honestly generally and genuinely get away from passion businesses because passion businesses, they become more of a driving force or a vendetta. Honestly, sometimes you can see people are doing it, and then you talk to these founders and they say, okay, have you spoken to the customers? Is like, no. And if they've done, they say, yeah, my wife told me this, or my brother or sister.
Yeah.
Like real users to tell you, like paying users to tell you what you're doing, and that's something that globally, not only in this region, is is really beginning to understand that because sometimes you wonder like how apps are being adopted. Like I'll give you an example. This new app that came out, Clubhouse. It's only on iOS, and it's like catching on fire in MENA because and when one guy, one of the founders I spoke to, said something brilliant. He said, "Voice is the new UI." Going back to the point is because people need to listen to their customers and people need to address those as we speak, because I feel that out of a necessity of that one person is not good enough.
Definitely. I mean, talking to user is kind of like the razor where you should kind of measure your ideas, right? And you can have brilliant ideas, but if nobody actually thinks the same way, you're going to have a hard problem, selling this and actually having adoption. I think Clubhouse is an interesting case, right? I think their timing was impeccable because, we're in quarantine times, everybody's feeling lonely. So I think they fulfill that need of kind of companionship and friendship, and they can listen to people. I think it came to the right time because, as a technology product, like there was a lot of kind of Clubhouses before, right? But nobody actually caught up like it because they had the timing really well. And kind of the other thing, so that's also another way, for example, to seed, like you talked about chicken and egg problem, this kind of exclusivity and FOMO thing, like with the invites, and you need to be on you can have certain brand of a phone, and you can only invite people and all of that. That also is a way you can actually, see the marketplace and like have solve this chicken and egg problem. So I think they played it brilliantly.
I think so too. I think it's definitely there's this app that is a Dubai-based company actually now listed on the New York Stock Exchange called Yalla, and they do this, the voice chat rooms, and they have millions of users as well on there, but nobody's heard of them. While Clubhouse, whole exclusive. I only have 2 more invites. People were talking, and I think also there was people like big celebrities who got on it.
Of course,
really pushed it as well. So that the adoption was like literally not even a hockey stick. It was like a ski slope. So
true. And they had a very controversial round, right? They raised this huge round, and people were like, okay, what is this? Why is this, prestigious VCs putting a lot of money into this thing that we never heard of? And they're like, oh, okay, here's all the artists and the comedians and everybody's there like doing, and Elon Musk, and so
exactly.
they really utilized that very well.
It's very definitely so. So let me ask you, I'm going to ask you 2 weird questions right now.
Okay.
This one is kind of fun. And it says, what is the silliest or weirdest thing you've heard about you, people say about you?
In a professional context, or like what my wife says?
let's keep it professional, Mamoun.
Okay. Sure. Let me think. So this actually happened a couple of times, a bunch of times in my career. And people are usually really well-meaning when they do it, when they say it. What I get is like, hey, you're this, technical person, but you're also, very extroverted, and you have really nice client-facing skills. And it's like, we can show you and like, show you and parade you for the clients, and you could talk to them and answer the questions. And like, wow, like I know people mean well, but there's like kind of this stereotype of this, engineer, programmer, hacker dude, in a hoodie and like a dark room and no social skills and all of that. I think, that idea need to change, right?
Working with you for very long as well, like, you are a great software engineer, and you are, I know you've done a lot of things with your own hands and stuff, but you do have both sides, and kind of broke the stereotype, but it's not a stereotype anymore, because now I do work with a lot of software engineers, and, they're very outgoing, and they're, they live among us, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge industry, and there's a lot of people from different backgrounds and different personalities who do it. And not to bash or like shame people who are introverted. I mean, you do you, like, capitalize on your strength and do that. But I just like the idea of perpetrating like all social engineers to be, socially inept or awkward, and they can't just talk to clients or whatever. I mean, I think that was one of the silliest thing somebody told me.
And believe it or not, like, introverts had their fun in the lockdowns. They were like, "Hey, this is heaven."
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And you got people like who are kind of personally introverted, but like professionally more extroverted. Like you got all combinations and all kind of people on the spectrum, right? So
That I agree 100%. So, my last question to you is: if you had a superpower,
mhm.
what what kind of superpower would you have, or who would be your superhero?
I think if I had a superpower, what I would like to have is actually kind of being able to see the best version of myself. Like I want to see like, hey, what does Mamoun realizing his full potential would look like?
Nice.
I think that would be, or like maybe also be able to tell other people what their actual potential would be. I think that would be awesome, right? Because then, we all have these kind of mental barriers in our head, and like, hey, I can't do this. Or I'm not gonna be one of these. I can't start this hobby. I can't start this company. I can't do that. I can do that. But I think if you had the superpower of actually realizing that here's actually your full potential would be, I think that would be really cool.
That is pretty cool. I haven't heard that yet, so it's cool that every guest has been giving their own spin on this question, which is
Yeah.
very. But your superpower is like being a super HR person.
Yeah, but maybe after spending 7 years in the industry, I secretly want to be an HR person. I don't know.
Maybe no, but it's that's super cool. Understanding potential is something, and
Mhm.
people's potential is, honestly, it is a superpower. It's very
Yeah.
difficult because people tend to rely on a lot of metrics and benchmarks, but uh,
Mhm.
and judgment only comes honestly with interacting with a lot of people. So that's something super cool too. So, Mamoun, it was great having you on the show. I think you gave us a lot of great insights. Again, we have a hashtag, by the way. It's
Mhm.
hashtag real talk, no nonsense. So this is,
Uh-huh.
we've been, I think, as real as possible. Anything you want to close with?
First, thank you for having me, Abe. It was really a pleasure having this conversation with you, as all of our other conversations. I want to close with to an advice to kind of early stage founders. The thing is, once you create something and you launch it or get it out there, you have this kind of initial high, initial buzz that comes with it, right? You start seeing things. You might have some press coverage, you might have some funding, and all these things are happening. But this goes all, this really disappears in a short while, and then you are left to your product. And a Y Combinator, they call this the trough of sorrow, I guess, which is basically the journey from this initial buzz and launch to actually getting your product market fit. And this is very lonely and very tiresome path, and you just have to just go through it, right? Resilience is key, and basically know that whatever effort you're putting in, it will basically pay back at some point, right? So hang in there, and I'm sure you do great.
I love it. I think I'm going to call your episode Resilience is Key. This is something super cool.
Nice.
Well, Mamoun, thank you again. Thank you very
Sure.
much. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you for having me. All right.
And until next time, take care.
Bye bye.